Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you with another deck profile, and for today's video, we're going to be doing Tearlaments once again, and this is of course going to be post the September 2nd Forbidden and Limited list. However, before we actually get into the profile itself, I just want to talk about the impact that the list had on this deck, just because even though none of the Tearlament monsters by themselves actually got like hurt or changed or whatever, we did receive two pretty major nerfs in the form of Appaloosa being banned and in the form of Beatrice being banned. As far as like Appaloosa goes, it's just a good generic end board piece that pretty much every deck relies on. Like, it's not the end of the world, but it does suck to lose it, especially because like the way that we deal with most decks, or the ways that we have to deal with most decks just continues to diminish, right? We don't have Beatrice, we don't have Appaloosa, we don't have Kit Claws to help us fuel our graveyard, we don't have Kelbeck and Agito. It just hit after hit after hit on every single list, and as if that wasn't bad enough, we ended up losing Beatrice, which honestly, the way that modern Tearlaments play, it heavily relied on Beatrice to be able to send whatever card we needed in that specific situation to actually be able to play. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, it really does suck losing Beatrice. Like, we really needed it, just because there's so many times where you need Beatrice to send like a Trivikarma, send a Tier Name, send a sulliek, send a Shuffler, send whatever, just to be able to continue to play and hopefully break or prevent your opponent's board from being able to break your board. But you know, at the end of the day, it's whatever. Konami's going to be Konami, and while it did deserve the ban, it does suck majorly. And I guess that's it for the bans, but there is also another brand new limit that did come off the list that some people may be thinking, why don't we just play that instead, as it helps the deck? And the card that I'm talking about is that Grasslook Screener. So that Grasslook Screener makes this deck shine when you're playing 60 cards, right? However, it's at 1, so you're pretty much not ever going to draw it all that often, if I'm being honest. And while we do have methods to search it out in the form of left arm offering, I don't really think it's worth playing with it, if I'm being honest, just because the way that left arm offering works, right, is you have to banish your entire hand 2 cards minimum, and then you add any spell from your deck to your hand or whatever. So you typically just activate your left arm offering after your opponent's used up a couple of hand traps, you add that Grasslook Screener, and then you activate it, and then you mill typically like a third of your deck, which, you know, pretty good, pretty strong. However, my problem with that is that with left arm offering, for the rest of this turn, or just like the turn that you decide to activate it, you're not able to set any spells and traps, right? So that means that cards like Tearlaments Sulliek, Grief, Crime, they basically just become bricks because you can't use them, period. They're just stuck in your hand, and that's not really something that we want to accomplish with the tier cards, right? You pretty much always want to have those cards set to help improve the way that your board plays into your opponent's deck, and you're basically just cutting off one of the most important aspects of your deck. And to make matters worse, we don't even have cards like Fairy Tale Snow to take advantage of the 20-ish cards that are constantly being milled off of it. So in my opinion, it's just not worth it. I'd rather just stick to the 40 cards, and then it's normally good enough to win the game on its own. But if you want to play 60 cards with that Grasslook Screener, by all means go for it. I really would not recommend it because I don't think it's the best way to play tier going forward. So with that out of the way, now we can finally jump into the deck profile itself. Now, as always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup, and we're of course going to be starting off with the most impactful monster in the deck, being 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart. So this is pretty much what the entire deck revolves around nowadays, just because on normal or special summon, you're able to foolish any tier monster except itself from deck to grave. So if you need to fusion summon with something, you send one of your tier fusioners. If you just want to mill more additional cards, you send tier cash. This card gives you access to Bahamut Toad. It's just like a nice general body to have, because when you pair it with Planet and Scream, your opponent's monsters have a very difficult time getting over 2k attack when their attack is being like lowered by Scream or whatever. And then speaking of Scream, you know, ideally like the best combo of the deck that you want to open up with is Reinoheart Scream, as you just make Reinoheart Chainlink 1, Scream Chainlink 2, you mill 3 cards, and then depending on what you mill, you send either your Fusion Summoner or your tier cash to mill more cards. So yeah, like I said, the entire deck revolves around this. You basically have to play 3 of it every single time if you want to play Tearlament to its max potential. Then to go with our 3 Reinohearts, we're going to be playing 3 Tearlaments Kashtira, another phenomenal card because on normal or special summon, it's able to mill 3 cards either from your deck or your opponent's deck. So if your opponent's deck is looking pretty low, you're able to deck them out, but that's pretty much never going to happen. We're basically just milling 3 cards from our own deck every single time. And as stated previously, this is the card that when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, it's able to mill 2 more cards. Next, we're playing the 1 of tier monsters, being the 1 of Scheiren, the 1 of Havnis, and the 1 of Merlli. Not much needs to be said. They basically all mill 3 cards each time if you meet the conditions for their effects. And then these are going to be the cards that we typically use to fusion summon with. If we could play more, we would, but we can't, so we won't. Now, as for the tier engine itself, that's basically going to be it. We're not going to be playing any Fenrir's this time, just because I don't really feel like it's that great currently, but I don't know. Fenrir is always one of those cards that's constantly coming in and out of the deck, so you'll definitely see it in like future variations, but for now I think this is perfectly fine. Now for cards that we definitely need to be playing, we're definitely going to need to be playing 3 Fiendsmith engravers. So this card quite literally just took the place of Destiny Hero Malicious as being our main primary rank 6 engine. And even with Beatrice being banned, this card is still phenomenal at what it's able to do, right? Because we still have access to cards like Pilgrim Reaper, which is basically Kelbeck and Agito in Exceed form, and countless other rank 6s that are honestly just really solid in general. But just though, like, the amount of fodder and like card advantage that this card provides you with is just unmatched, right? So it's always going to be an instant rank 6. It's always going to be like a free body on the field during like your follow-ups, as long as you recycle a Light Fiend. Its stats are honestly pretty solid, 18-24, so it's not like the weakest or strongest thing in the world. But yeah, this card is just phenomenal, and it really does still help out even with the Beatrice ban. Then to go with our 3 engravers, we're still playing the one Fabled Lurrie. This is going to be like your main target off a tract typically. And even if it's like hard drawn without the other Fiendsmith stuff, it's still perfectly fine, right? It's not like the worst normal summon in the world. But yeah, you don't need more than one, and sometimes you don't even really need it at all. So if you want to fit something else, maybe start with this. I don't know, it's up to you. Then for the other monster lineup, now since we did lose Appaloosa, that means we're going to have to rely on cards like Rukolos a lot more to be able to negate cards like Nibiru, which is definitely going to be seeing an increase in popularity. So as a result, we're going to be back to playing 2 Beast King of the Swamps. And the reason why we're playing this over the original King of the Swamp is literally just because it's a level 4 aqua or a level 4 water as opposed to a level 3 water, as that means that it's able to help us make cards like Bahamut Shark into Toad a lot more easily. But yeah, that's literally it. If it wasn't for that reason, we'd definitely be playing King of the Swamp instead. But it does its job well. So yeah, 2 Beast King of the Swamps. And then for the other monsters, we're still playing a Bystial lineup just because, you know, level 6, good. And then because Engraver is a lot weaker now with the loss of Lacrima, that means like if you Bystial a Engraver trying to summon itself back from the grave, for example, a lot of the times the combo just pretty much ends right then and there. So Bystials are definitely more important. And then you do have the synergy with like the rank 6 engine, it being a dark, so you can shuffle them back with your tier monsters and, you know, just good things like that. So we played the 1 magnamhut, the 1 druiswurm, and the 1 Baldrake. You know, just really good generic cards to help you with your dark and light matchups. And even if, like I said, you don't run into any, they're still just very good extenders that you can drop on your own at any given point. So yeah, you gotta play those guys. And then for the final monster, we're just playing the 1 Mudora, the Sword Oracle. Now, why do I play this over Keldo? It has 300 more attack. That's it. But yeah, it's 1 shuffler. You don't want to draw this when you're going second. It's probably like one of the worst cards to have in your hand. But if you're going first, you pretty much need this to be able to stop your opponent from taking advantage of the graveyard, especially if you're playing against like Snake Eyes, for example. So with that, that's the monster lineup. And now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion. Now, when it comes to the spell and trap lineup, it's actually changed pretty heavily compared to like the previous spells, just because there's a lot of really good 1-0 spells that I just opted to try out again. So with that in mind, let's just get with the standard stuff first, being the 3 Primeval Planet Perlereino. On activation, it searches and boosts your tiers and fusions by 500, and then it pops cards when a tier monster gets shuffled back into the deck. Gotta play 3. Then to accompany our 3 planets, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Scream. You know, probably the best card to open up with your Reinoheart, because even if like your hand is pretty mediocre, as long as you have Tearlaments Scream plus like Reinoheart or just any other tier monster, you can at least play during your opponent's turn, which is always, you know, pretty valuable to have. And then for the last 3 we're playing 3 Triple Tactics Talent. With the loss of Appaloosa, I don't know if this card is going to be worse or better than playing something, for example, such as Forbidden Droplet. But with the rise of cards like the Nibiru in the main deck, I definitely think Triple Tactics Talent is going to be seeing a lot more, like, not seeing a lot more play, but it's going to be a lot more useful just to, like, counteract those cards and be able to continue, like, playing or drawing or taking away a card from your opponent's hand, you know, things like that. So, yeah, I think I'm definitely leaning more towards Talent this specific time, but it could always change. You know, I'm always flip-floppy on this. Sometimes I like Droplet more, sometimes I like Talent more, but for now, I think Talent is definitely the way to go. And then after that, we have a bunch of 1-ofs. So we're going to be playing the 1 Foolish Burial Goods, the 1 Foolish Burial, and the 1 Tearlaments Grief. basically the exact same thing, right? Foolish Burial Good sends any spell and trap from your deck to the graveyard, which in turn is typically going to be like cards like Trivikarma or Sulliek to be able to add any monster. Foolish Burial sends any monster, and then Tearlaments Grief is quite literally Emergency Teleport or Foolish Burial combined into one, as it's able to special summon a tier monster from your grave or deck, and then you have to send something with the same type from your field to the graveyard. So they basically all serve similar functions in the point that they're going to give you access to a monster at some point. Then for the other one-ofs, since we're playing the Fiendsmith, you got to play the one Fiendsmith Tract. And then the one that we are also playing is Fiendsmith Sanct. So this card is basically Sky Striker drones in the fact that it gives you a Fiendsmith token, which is, you know, light, fiend, whatever, that allows you to have full combo. And the inclusion of this card is actually one of the main reasons why I'm not playing Kashtira Fenrir, as the two engines tend to conflict, right? As this card requires you to have no face-up monsters in the field, and Fenrir requires you to have no face-up monsters in the field to special summon it. So I just opted to play this over the other engine, just because, as opposed to before, where sometimes you would activate this and then you wouldn't have enough fodder in your grave to be able to fusion summon something like Lacrima, for example. Since Lacrima is banned, we literally do not care anymore. Just having access to this to be able to pretty much give us instant access to our Fiendsmith engine is just invaluable, as rank sixes are still stupidly strong for what we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, the one Fiendsmith Sanct, pretty solid. Then we're playing the one Reinforcement of the Army, not Terraforming, Reinforcement of the Army, as it's basically our fourth copy of Reinoheart, right? Literally that simple. For the other one, we're still playing the one Call by the Grave to go with our 3 triple tactics talent. I still really like the one Reasoning. You know, if you draw it, it's fantastic because you play so many different levels that your opponent's never going to know what to call. And if they call it correctly, it honestly doesn't matter because we want our cards either on the field or the grave. We just don't care. We just want them. And then for the final spell card, I decided to try Card Destruction out again. It's okay, you know, sometimes you'll end up going against like a Dark Hole player and just get your ass beat because you triggered all their secondary effects, but that's the risk we're willing to take. But yeah, Card Destruction, it's fine. It's one of those power cards that if it resolves, a lot of the time you just straight up win because you're typically going to be triggering like 3 to 4 cards off of this, and the momentum that you gain from it is honestly just going to be too much for your opponent in a lot of situations. But it's still a one-of. You're not going to draw it every time, much like Reasoning, but it's still a pretty funny card that can sometimes just swing the momentum into your favor. So I opted to try it out. Then that's it for the spell lineup. And then for the traps, you got the 2 Tearlaments Sulliek to negate monster effects and search monsters when it's into the graveyard by card effect, and then the 1 Trivikarma. Nothing too crazy in that front, you know, pretty much the same trap lineup as always. And with that, that's the main deck. 40 cards like always, and now we can finally move on to the extra. Now, as stated earlier, the extra deck did receive some pretty big changes, right? We lost Appaloosa, we lost Beatrice, and we lost Lacrima. 3 really important cards that helped us accomplish the game plan that we were trying to achieve. But even so, I feel like the extra deck is still pretty strong with what we're able to do currently. So with that, we're going to be starting off with the Link monsters first. And as a result, we're going to be playing the 1 IP Masquerena, which is only there to go into the 1 SP Little Knight. You know, it's the only thing that we have left. If you can't afford Little Knight, it's coming out in the tins in like 2 weeks. And if you still can't afford it then I guess you just got to play Nightmare Unicorn. But I mean, Unicorn's solid, right? It basically does the same thing. But yeah, that's it for that. And then we do play a couple other links. The Moon of the Closed Heaven, of course. Any 2 monsters is full Fiendsmith combo. And then for the final link monster, we're just playing 1 Fiendsmith Requiem to cheat out engraver from the deck. Now, I said final, right? So that means we're not playing sequence. And the reason for that is just because while we can make cards like Desiree, a lot of the times it's just not really worth it if I'm being honest. Something like Requiem is typically more than enough. If we were playing like a Lightsworm variant, for example, I'd definitely be going all in on the sequence because we have more targets, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem very worth it. And then a lot of the times too, you'd be using sequence to go into Appaloosa, but we can't even do that anymore. You just basically just be making sequence and then going straight into your SP Little Knight instead of trying to make it with your IP Masquerena, or you're just equipping it straight from the field, which I don't know. I just, like I said, I'm not really a big fan of that, so I just opted to cut it entirely and play other cards instead. And honestly, it's still working out pretty well, at least in my opinion. But if you want to keep playing Sequence and Desiree, because let's face it, they're still really good, impactful cards, by all means, go for it. I just really don't feel like they're needed anymore. You can definitely just get away with the 1 Closed Heaven and the 1 Fiendsmith Requiem as far as like the links are concerned. Then for the fusion monsters, we have our super poly targets being the 1 Mudragon of the Swamp, the one dragostapelia, and the one Garura, Wings of Resonant Life. Garura has made its way back into the extra deck just because, you know, we opened up 3 free slots, and it's still like a really solid card. It's a level 6 monster, so you can go for rank 6 plays a lot more easily, and you are typically going to be hitting multiple tiers at some point throughout the game, so just having this as an option is pretty invaluable. Then for the other fusion, because we don't play like, well, because Lacrima's banned, that pretty much means that we're going to be making Necroquip Princess every single time, right? And the typical play that you do off of this, right, is you summon your engraver off your requiem, you equip it with requiem, you summon the princess by sending those 2 to the graveyard, and then your engraver's graveyard effect will activate to bring itself back, and then boom, you have an instant rank 6. Now, as for what you make off of there, that's up to you and like what your hand looks like or what your board looks like, but yeah, you know, pretty solid stuff. You definitely got to include this nowadays just because it really is that important to be able to play with the Fiendsmith engine if you want to. Then for the other fusions, you have the one Rokolos and the one Kaleidoheart. Really straightforward, really standard stuff. That's it for the fusions. And then for the Exceed monsters, time 3 free doer. Since we're not playing the sequence and the Desiree, that means we can finally slot this card back in. And I've always been a really big fan of Redoer, just being able to take opponents' resources and use it against them, you know. If it takes a spell, you get to draw a card. If it takes a monster, it's typically always going to have like a monster, especially when you make it, obviously. So that's not that big of a deal, but it's able to banish itself for the rest of the turn. And if you take a trap, you're able to bounce a card that's face up in your opponent's field back to the top of their deck. So, you know, it has a lot of really cool uses. But it's by far the most cuttable card, so if you want to fit back in the sequence in the Desiree, I'd probably start here. But yeah, even so, it's still a really phenomenal card. And then you have your Bahamut Shark, which we use to make Totally Awesome. You know, really basic stuff. And then we play 2 rank 6s. So the first one is going to be DDD Wave High King Caesar. So this is something that I pretty much neglected to play previously just because we had Appaloosa, right? We didn't really have like a need for this, but because you're going to be using engraver to pretty much always go into a rank 6, if your hand is honestly pretty weak to cards like Nibiru, for example, you're pretty much just going to always shotgun into Wave King Caesar as, you know, just detach material, then you negate that effect. And it also helps you beat Bystials if they for some reason didn't Bystial your engraver earlier in the game. But I don't know how to feel about this card because, like, obviously this card does stop cards like Bystials and Nibiru, but the fact of the matter is, by the time this card would come out, if they wanted to hit you with like a Bystial or a Nibiru, they would have done it already, because the combo required to set this card up is always going to hit 5 summons every single time. So I figured if they have it, they're going to drop it every single time regardless, so this card kind of becomes like pointless in that sense. And then if they don't drop it, that typically reads that they don't have it, right? Unless they are just waiting for you to end your turn so they can drop it with like an imperm or something, which, you know, sometimes it does happen. Sometimes they have it, but a lot of the time they don't. They just have the one card and then they're just praying that it's enough to stop you right then and there. But even so, like, it's still a really solid card. I'm surprised it's still legal, let's be honest. It is a little bit ignorant. But yeah, I don't think you're going to be making this card all that often. Instead, we're going to be making Pilgrim Reaper because it's literally Kelbeck and Agito, you know? You detach 1, you mill 5 cards from both players' decks. But yeah, with that, that's the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. And if you didn't, let me know why down below, because I'd love to hear and read your comments. So with that, I'll catch you guys next time, all right? Take it easy and see ya.